Hello, welcome back. This is Professor Young, and we are beginning Chapter 17, the Endocrine System. One of the more fundamental systems that we need to understand before we tackle any of the other systems, primarily because it has regulatory control over hormones. And hormones are going to play an essential part in almost every other system that we talk about from now until the end of the semester. So this is going to be one of those critical chapters to make sure that you understand. And so as we begin this, please make sure you're staying on top of everything and really spending some time at home looking over your notes, asking questions, making sure things make sense. Again, the number one best indicator to predict whether or not you understand something is, can you effectively teach it or explain it to someone else? And if you can do that, then you know you have a good grasp of the material. And so as we begin here with Chapter 17, we need to understand exactly what we are dealing with here. And the endocrine system is a series of glands and tissues whose primary control here is to secrete hormones. And that's really the key here. Whereas neurotransmitters are used within the nervous system to direct communication, hormones are used within the endocrine system as well as within the nervous system, but we're dealing with the endocrine system here. Hormones are used by the endocrine system to direct communication. On this level, it is a chemical form of communication. And as we go through this, you'll be collecting, if you would, more and more examples of how the endocrine system uses hormones as a chemical system of communication. I made a brief mention about the nervous system and its use of neurotransmitters. What is before you is some of the similarities and differences found between the nervous system and the endocrine system. You can see, as I already mentioned, that the nervous system relies on electrical primarily and secondarily the chemical or hormones as means of communication, whereas the endocrine system is solely dependent upon the hormones. Within a nervous system, you can get a response within a few milliseconds, so that excuse me, so that if your hand is on a hot stove, you can move it pretty much instantaneously, whereas the endocrine system, it's going to take a couple seconds or longer for that stimulus to kick in. The nervous system can stop almost instantly the communication or the response, whereas the endocrine system, that might be a little bit longer lasting. And the primary reason is because the nervous system is going to rely on precise signals being sent to specific targets or areas within the body, whereas the endocrine system chiefly relies on body-wide circulation of the hormones, and so that's a key area there, right? So, how exactly do these things that we are identifying as hormones work? Well, hormones aren't just going to be released into the body and act anywhere. In other words, testosterone is not going to be released from the testes and end up in the heart and cause some kind of reaction within the heart. It doesn't quite work that way. In order for the endocrine system to work properly, there has to be target areas that are found within the body. And so these target organs or these target cells are going to have receptors on them that are specifically designed to accept, if you would, the hormone. And so that way the impact that the hormone would have on that target area can be felt. And so specific receptors for specific hormones will direct and kind of dictate how that hormone is going to be used. And so we refer to those receptors, specific receptors, as the target organs or the target cells. Some basic info for you to, or terminology for you to make sure that you understand. Exocrine, or things like sweat glands, salivary glands, anything that's going to release a substance either into a lumen or to the outer surface of the body. That is different than an endocrine system or an endocrine gland. Endo, I should say this, let me back up here. Exo here refers to outside, where endo as a prefix simply refers to within. And so endocrine, this is going to be a gland which is going to secrete its hormone or product, if you would, directly into the bloodstream, and then it's going to be carried within that bloodstream to the target cell or target tissue. The difference is it never fully actually reaches the outside of the body, where exocrine gland will, keep yawning, will at some point in time reach the outside of the body. Paracrine hormones are going to be hormones that are going to act locally. They are released locally. They stay locally. Usually within a few inches of being released is where they're going to react. Whereas the traditional term hormones refers to a substance, a chemical substance that is released into the bloodstream and travels to a distance, to another organ, another site, and that is where it's going to act. So it's released from location A, travels to location B, and that's where it has its impact. And it tends to be more of a global impact. What determines or what regulates the release of these hormones? We have to go back into the central nervous system in order for us to fully understand and really get an appreciation for where these hormones are being directed from. We know that within the center of the brain, we have an area that is here in the yellow, referred to as the hypothalamus. And extending down from the hypothalamus, we know we have the structure referred to as the infundibulum. Connected to the infundibulum, hanging down from the infundibulum, is a structure which is right here. That structure there is the pituitary gland. The pituitary gland is controlled by or regulated by the hypothalamus. And that's key for you to make sure. That's key to make sure that you understand. Even though the pituitary gland, or the hypophyseus, as it's also sometimes referred to, so another term for the pituitary gland is the hypophyseus. All right. Even though this is very often considered the master gland, you got to keep in mind that it's not really operating by itself. It's not the overall mastermind. It is receiving its directions from the hypothalamus within the central nervous system. So kind of keep that in mind. The pituitary gland is divided into two areas. We have one area that is located anteriorly, right here, and we have another area that is located posteriorly, right here. The anterior portion of the pituitary gland, oddly enough, is called the anterior pituitary. And the area of the pituitary that is located behind that front portion is, oddly enough, called the posterior pituitary. Very often you will hear the anterior pituitary referred to as the adenohypophyseus and the posterior pituitary referred to as the neurohypophyseus. That name, at least for the neurohypophyseus, comes from the fact that it is directly linked to the hypothalamus through the infundibulum. The anterior pituitary is not. That is not the case. You almost got to think about this as being two separate structures. The anterior pituitary and the posterior pituitary are not one solid structure. They are two independent structures so closely connected that it appears that they are the same structure. It is not. In fact, embryologically speaking, the posterior pituitary descends down from the hypothalamus, whereas the anterior pituitary originates from the pharynx within the developing fetus or developing embryo, and then is derived actually from the pharynx. So these are truly two different structures that we see here. And I want to make sure that you keep that in mind as we go forward with this. This next slide here is a picture of a fetus, a developing embryo. And what you're looking at right in this area, this here would be the development of the midbrain, which would include, if you would, the thalamus and the hypothalamus. And that hypothalamus would actually extend down into this area right in here, and located right about here would be the posterior pituitary. And so that is where that's developing from. And you can see in that picture the direct link to what would eventually become the hypothalamus, and how the anterior pituitary would actually go ahead and develop from that, if you would, or originate from that. Now, let me switch gears here a little bit. In a developing fetus, that area right there is where the pharynx is coming in at. And it's from that area where we again see the eventual development of what would become the anterior pituitary. And so they are two separate structures. Embryologically, the posterior, histologically, the posterior and pituitary would actually resemble that more of the neural tissue that we find within the thalamus and the hypothalamus. Histologically speaking, the anterior pituitary would resemble that more of the pharynx within the developing, or actually within any kind of human. Histologically speaking, those tissues would be more similar to one another. Now, the last thing I will leave you with for this, and I think this is exactly where we left off with lecture, a little bit more specifics about what we're referring to here when we talk about the pituitary. What you're looking at, the entire structure down here, right, this whole entire structure there is the pituitary. That whole structure is the pituitary. If I crudely divide that in half, you are looking at the posterior pituitary right there, and you're looking at the anterior pituitary right there, just to kind of give you that visual of where we are looking at and what we are referring to here. Within that, what you need to make sure that you understand is that Really, the pituitary is made up of three distinct areas: the pars distalis, the pars tuberalis, and the pars intermedia. Now, that is a term that is not on your slide, pars intermedia. And what you need to know about the pars intermedia is the pars intermedia is really only found within the developing embryo. It serves no known function within humans, but in other animals, the pars intermedialis actually helps. Let me type this in here. Other animals. And when I say other animals, I'm referring to outside of humans. It actually helps to direct the secretion of melanocyte-stimulating hormones. And so these would be hormones that would help to stimulate the production of melanocytes within the skin cells. In humans, this is not the case. In fact, during the third trimester of development, the pars intermedia actually just kind of disappears, and it's no longer seen except for some kind of residual, a little bit of a connective tissue within the newly born infant, and that follows right on through adulthood. So the pars intermedia is only present within human fetuses during development. By the third trimester, it goes away, and by the time that child is born, it does not have the pars intermedia, and so that means you only have to really worry about the pars distalis and the pars tuberalis. The pars tuberalis, I want you to think of tuberalis. Think of a tube, and that is going to be located. You've actually got one branch of it right here, and you've got another branch of it right there. So that blackened, darkened areas is the pars tuberalis, and it basically serves as a canal or a passageway, if you would, for the neural tissue going down into the posterior pituitary. But it is associated with the anterior pituitary. Don't confuse that. And then you have the pars distalis. And the pars distalis is distal, if you would, or further south, and that is that area right in there. So that would be the pars distalis. Where the arrows are, the pars tuberalis, pars intermedia is no longer there. And it's important to remember that anterior pituitary is not neurologically connected. It is not neurologically connected to the hypothalamus. As we will learn in lecture, the anterior pituitary, the adenohypophyseus, is actually receiving its stimulation through capillaries, through blood supply, and not through neural direction. And so we will discuss that a little bit more in lecture as we continue with this. You will notice that I did not include the name game slide on this. It does not mean that it is not important. You still need to be responsible in reviewing for those names and know the abbreviations, know the names, and as we begin this journey, we will start to understand what the role of each of these and some other ones as well. But primarily, these guys right here, you'll get to know what their function is, where they operate at, and their key role in maintaining homeostasis. Keep in mind, this all goes back to homeostasis. How does the body stay functioning within a normal range? How does it maintain dynamic equilibrium? And that's our goal. Everything we do is centered around that. And so on that note, I will go ahead and leave you for today. As always, if you have any questions, feel free to email me. Feel free to go back and check out one of these slides, listen to it as many times as you need to. The PowerPoint's always posted, as you probably already know. And we'll see you in lecture. This is Professor Young, signing off. Have yourself a good day.